Welcome to the Gray Area Podcast presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray. Thanks for listening today. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. It's Interview Wednesdays right here on the Gray Area as I bring in my guest today. He covers the Dallas Cowboys for The Athletic, friend of the Gray Area podcast and noted Duke fan. So this time of year is pretty fun for him.
Let's get it.
My man Jon Machota joining me here on the podcast. John, what's going on?
Man, I'm pumped, man. The Devils are going to be in Dallas on Friday. I mean, I don't think they're going to win, but I'll be there. So I'm happy.
I'm about to say, it sounds like you're going to be there, though, right?
Oh, yeah. No, if Duke's anywhere within probably a 6-7 hour drive, I'll probably be there.
How did you and Duke come into a relationship with each other?
My mom's maiden name is Krzyzewski. My parents, I'm from Detroit, right outside Detroit. Mike Krzyzewski's family is all from like the Chicago area and stuff like that. So I'm sure somewhere down the line, there's probably some crossover there, but, that part of it, I was way more into basketball than I was into football. I mean, that's what I played, in high school and stuff like that. And I just, there's the area where I'm from it's pretty close to where Shane Battier is from, and he's a few years older than me. But when he went to Duke, it was just like that. Man, this is he's the man and all that. And so that really took everything to another level. And then since then, really, I don't know. I almost feed off the hate as much as anything else because there's so many people that despise them that I just love it. But yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Nothing pissed me off more than watching Jay Williams slap the floor after he made a basket and then go back on the defensive end. I'm like, all right, Jay, we get it. The camera crazies are into it. Y'all doing what y'all do, but it's funny because the level of hate as the years have gone on and the forms of players that have taken it on, whether it be Christian Laettner to JJ Redick to Jay Williams to any number of Duke players that you want to name. But there was one particular player real quick that I had a lot of respect for, and it was Trajan Langdon. For some reason, he was the guy like, you know what? I could actually rock with Trajan Langdon a little bit. Guy from Alaska, but could shoot the three. Like he was a kind of a cool dude, but other than that, I couldn't stand really any of the other ones, but Trajan Langdon for some reason was the one I could actually, kind of get down with a little bit.
That's funny because like when I played high school basketball, sometimes I would try and shoot free throws like him. There was just like a way he used to like hold the ball to the side. He was just such a great shooter. But yeah, no, man, I loved Trajan Langdon. That's bringing back some good memories. But the other thing is with me too, is it just like, when you grow up in Michigan, outside of like once out of every maybe 6-7 years that they might come to Ann Arbor or East Lansing. Duke doesn't come up that way very often, And so as I've gotten older, I've made it a point to like, I go to a lot more games. Like I the last 3 off seasons I've gone to, NFL off seasons, I've gone to Cameron for games. And I've become even more obsessed than I was probably when I was younger about it. And then the other part of it is just the fact of, that when you cover an NFL team, it makes it more difficult to like really like, I grew up a Lions fan. Like I would love to see the Lions, have success like they did this past season, but like I can't follow it as closely. Like college basketball lines up like perfectly with the NFL season, and so because of that, it's, and then also the other part of it is, I mean, I grew up a big Pistons fan and, they've just been so bad for the last, 15, 20 years that I don't think anybody would have saw that coming. Like not winning championships or whatever, that's one thing, but the drought that they had between like Isaiah Thomas to Chauncey seemed like forever in my life. And this drought from Chauncey to what they are now is just like, man, are they ever gonna fix it? So that's another part where it's like year in and year out. I'm not saying that Duke every year has a chance to win the national championship, but they're in the picture to where like I'll go on my way to always watch their games because they're always competitive. Whereas I have friends that are maybe went to Michigan State or another school, and there's just some years where they're like, I don't follow as much this year or whatever, where it's like, almost every year, Duke is good enough to where, I'm following what they're doing pretty much on a game-to-game basis.
Yeah, the Sweet 16 this coming weekend, as John mentioned, Duke will be in Dallas. So it's always a fun time of the year because you have the convergence of obviously the NCAA tournament. You've got Major League Baseball about to kick off with opening day. And, of course, we're in the middle of the NFL offseason as we are just about a month away. In fact, we are a month away from the NFL draft taking place, ironically, in Detroit, as we'll look to see what the Cowboys do. And, as we go along in our conversation today, Cowboys fans are a interesting group to say the least, because the amount of passion and fervor that this group has for this football team spans across many kinds of people, a lot of different people, a lot of different places. But at the same time, they are a lot of which commonly united by the idea that they don't get down with Jerry and Stephen Jones these days. What for you has just made this offseason feel so much different versus what it may have been over the last several seasons?
Oh, I would say there's no question they've done less than they've even done in those other seasons. In those other seasons, they're already at the bottom in terms of teams with activity. And so I'd say that's the number one thing that stands out. But the way I compare it is that's already, coming off of the way that the season ended. I felt that really that team that they just had in the 2023 season is the best Cowboys team on paper that they've had in over a decade. And I thought that was their best chance to make a deep playoff run. And that was before they even got some help to where they ended up with the 2 seed and got, get some home games. You're just thinking, man, this team's been the best home team over the last 2 seasons. So it's everything was ramped up to if it's going to be different, this would be the season it would be different for them to finally get over the hump in January. And to not only, lose to the Packers, but lose in the fashion they did, where really, can you really point to anybody like CeeDee, Micah, Dak that they even played well in that game? And so there's so much stuff that happened there that was disheartening. So you go into this offseason know that they're probably not going to be really super active. And then Jerry just really leans in this all-in thing. And so I said that there was that's kind of there was already a fire because, fans are frustrated. And then Jerry just threw kerosene on it, that didn't need to be. It didn't need to have that on there,
Yeah.
I think I would have been better off if Jerry just would have come out and said, "Hey, we got a lot of tough decisions to make. We got to try and re-sign Dak, CeeDee, and Micah. So, this free agency, this is going to be tough to really whatever." And he wasn't really saying that at the Senior Bowl. So when I got out to Indy for the combine, start talking to people, I'm just your eyes almost get wide because you're just oh wow, this going to be at best like previous off seasons after he said all that all in stuff. And you're just I don't know how to deliver this blow without me, people shooting the messenger, where I'm just kind of ducking under the table. Hey, I just want to tell you guys, the stuff I'm hearing in Indy, it's not good. It's going to be bad, and then even now, just this week with what Jerry's been saying in Orlando and stuff, and you're just man, this is week 3 of free agency, and there's nothing been done. So let's just back off the all-in thing. You're just pissing people off at this point. So that's how it's been different from the other offseason.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding people we're not even out of March yet, and it already feels like it's been 2 years worth of offseason because of the way things have gone down so far. But at the same time, as we move forward with this team, okay, you and I know that the quarterback obviously is the most important position in the NFL and maybe in all of team sports. And for this particular quarterback, the Cowboys are in a position right now. They've got a $55 million cap hit for Dak Prescott. They cleared out some space to drop it from 59 to 55 going into this upcoming season. But the way, John, it feels like they're going about all of this, and maybe it does end up with Dak getting a contract extension. But at the same time, in a lot of ways, the plan and how they're getting there feels real haphazard and chaotic. What have you made about the way that they've gone about this in terms of how they're moving forward with Dak Prescott to try and somehow find a resolution to this? So,
of all radio or podcast, anything that I participate in, I will say that I think the gray area is it's outstanding. It's got a perfect name for your show and stuff like that. And I love that Kent Garrison, who runs our podcast, came up with About Them Cowboys because it's a play on How About Them Cowboys. If I had my own podcast, it would be called Actions Speak Louder Than Words. And it's just because of the things that I've seen in my time covering the Cowboys. And so when you ask me that, the actions are, forget the words because they don't matter. The actions are, we're in the 3rd week of free agency and this thing isn't done yet. Why would you do it now? Just let him play it out. What are you getting the break on on the salary cap by getting a deal done right now? What are you getting out of it? Unless you're just panicked that you think that as soon as he gets a free agency, he's just man, this Dallas stuff is the worst. Get me out of here now. And as bad as Cowboys fans might think it is, Dak is a very smart businessman, so don't think he's trying to run out of town. So I think that they know that, so they feel like they have that leverage. But there's a part of me where it's like, if it's not done now, I could see, and another part of the actions could be they're showing a little bit of their hand right now, and not anything getting done, in the whole like, nah, we want you to play out another season. Let's see what we got in you. Let's see. Maybe there's some stuff that happens that makes us think this is the time to go in another direction. Like I will say this: when they win 12 games each of the last 3 seasons and don't have any sustained playoff success to make you feel like it's any different, I'm very pro Dak. If I'm running the Cowboys, a deal would have been done already, because I just think there's a way higher chance of being way worse than better. But you can't say it's a 100%. This is what you do. There is a little bit of well, no, they're right. And if you don't feel that way, don't get me wrong. There's a huge portion of the fan base that they're going to follow the team no matter what. I'm not talking to them right now. They're going to love them if Trey Lance is the quarterback, Cooper Rush, somebody that's in college right now. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying anybody that's like very critical of the team, I bet you there were some times after that Packers game or last year in the playoffs against San Francisco, some other games throughout the year this past season where you were like, you know what? Let's let them play it out and let's see what happens. So let's not act like this is just a no-brainer 100%. Oh, you just do this. It's Mahomes. You just do this. Like, I wouldn't go that far. That far. I do, like I said, I am a big believer in Dak Prescott. I mean, heck, he's only going to be 31. To me, that's very young for a quarterback. Like, obviously he had the ankle injury. Probably not going to become more mobile later on in his career. But I just feel like the longer he's in the game, the more and more you learn. The more you're a veteran of the game, you don't have to move around in the pocket as much. Becomes a point where there's nothing anybody can throw at you that you haven't seen before. But I'm just saying that I can understand where they're coming from to a certain extent. If they are like, hey, it's been 9 years, maybe it's time to go another direction, or at least let's play this thing out and see what happens. Because I think a lot of fans are worried, that, oh,
sure,
man, if they go into 2025 and they don't have Dak, what? I mean, this could be going back to Quincy Carter years, and I don't want to go there. And I understand that, but there could be a part of them too where they're just like, no, if Dak has a good year and it's pretty clear that, another year, let's say like he just had right here, runner up for MVP, well, we're not going to let him go. We'll give him a deal, and unless someone just comes out and blows us out of the water, which it's possible, but I think that now more than ever they're willing to take that gamble.
It's funny because I feel like, and I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, I feel like the Cowboys have in a lot of ways lost these negotiations with Dak, not from necessarily what's going on right now, and not even the contract that he got for the $160 million. I take it all the way back to when Jared Goff was with the Rams and when Carson Wentz was with the Philadelphia Eagles, and they decided not to give him an extension at that particular point when you saw Wentz and Goff getting theirs. I felt like at that point, the Cowboys were going down a road that could eventually get us to maybe not necessarily Kirk Cousins territory where he's just banking money every single year, but not getting that process started back then has really come to bite them now based off of the way that it appears Dak has most of the leverage here based on the fact that you don't want to see a guy who's about to be 31 years old coming off finishing top 2 in the league in the MVP voting, probably be the best quarterback ever to hit free agency, and then you would lose him for nothing if you don't get a contract done with him. I just have a hard time believing that the Cowboys would let themselves get to this point, but yet that's where we are right now.
Yeah, it depends. If you can make the argument though, if the season plays out exactly like every one of these last 28 have, where it's not them making even an NFC Championship game, there's got to be a part of you that looks at it and goes, at the end of the day, we don't think Dak is the problem, but maybe we need to readjust stuff that we're doing. Again, I'm talking about the Cowboys. I wouldn't do this. I'm just saying that I could. Their actions are showing this, just like they were at that time. And there's always been a part of me that like they're never going to say publicly like, well, we need to see more from Dak. They're never going to. He's the franchise quarterback. He's a good dude. He does everything, says everything the right way. He doesn't throw any ownership or coaches under the bus or anything like that. They're not going to do that. But for you to not just get this deal done, like makes you think that like, no, you still want to see more from him. And frankly, like I said, if you haven't been to an NFC Championship game yet, that's probably part of it. And it's let's be honest, that's unfair to put it all on Dak. Could he have played better in the playoffs the last couple of years? Absolutely. But I don't know how much help he really got from the guys around him. I don't look at him as like, well, he's the thing holding them down. You got to move in another direction, But and then here's the other thing for anybody that's out there thinking like, well, yeah, you just lose him, then here we go. Cowboys are going to be like a 3-win team. It's like, I don't know, man. Like I've thought that a lot over the last few years about quarterback situations. You know, we talk about the Rams or the Lions, things like that. And sometimes, you know, I mean, heck, even like Baker Mayfield going to the Bucks and leading them to the playoffs this past year. I mean, there's just some head scratching things that happen that it speaks more to it being a league of parity than it does about anybody like having the secret sauce in terms of managing teams. That just basically, if you're in the NFL, you're going to keep getting high draft picks if you're bad. Eventually, you'll get enough of them that you're going to have a good year here or there where you have a chance to potentially make a run. So, obviously, I think they're better off with Dak Prescott than without him. But I'm just saying, I don't think it's the end of the world if we got to 2025 and they're like, no, we're going another direction.
Let's take a quick break here on the Gray Area Podcast and hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. And let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on the Gray Area Podcast with Jon Machota of The Athletic, talking all things Cowboys as we are, of course, in the middle of the offseason and talking about the quarterback in terms of Dak Prescott. And we started with him because in a lot of ways we thought if the Cowboys got a deal done with him, maybe that could open up some things for them to be able to play a little bit in free agency, which notoriously they don't necessarily do in the first week of free agency. But at the same time, there are a lot of holes to fill on this team, and yet they really haven't done much of anything. They signed Eric Kendricks to be a part of their defense, but at the same time, they've watched several starters leave, whether it be Tony Pollard, Tyler Biadasz, take your pick. This team isn't better than what they were when they left the field against Green Bay after the wild card round. How do they go about trying to fix this? Because they've got a lot of stuff to fix it for a team that's supposed to be, close in terms of winning a championship. It doesn't feel like they're that much closer going into this upcoming season right now.
No, and they won't be. And you really shouldn't have thought that after the season was over, that they were going to have a better roster. That's another part of when I said they lost to the Packers, just the feeling of like, man, that's the best Cowboys team on paper in a long time that was relatively healthy. I mean, obviously you didn't have Diggs and you didn't have Leighton Vander Esch, but what team wasn't without a couple, starters and things like that. But I mean, that whole offense was the same offense that was out there in week 1 of training camp, and to have that go all the way through the season into the playoffs, you got to show up a little bit more in your bag than I saw against the Packers. It's pretty embarrassing stuff there. So with that being said, man, listening to McCarthy at the owners' meetings, it was, man, he's in full Packers mode of where he's got to develop guys on the roster, and that's pretty.
How does he do that in the final year of a 5-year contract? Like if you're Mike McCarthy and you're sitting there thinking, I got to do all of this, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to even be back at the end of the 2024 season anyway. Like, I just wonder how he plays all this in his mind. I mean, he's got a job to do, but at the same time, that's a lot to have to try and take in to try and get this done in that way.
Yeah, no, there's no question. He's in a tough spot. I mean, but that's the thing with the Packers teams. Like, they obviously relied heavily on draft and develop like this Cowboys team has done. But it makes – here's the thing. If you saw more from Mozzie Smith or Luke Schoonmaker or DeMarvion Overshown played last year. Or let's say you saw more over the last couple of years from Matt Waletzko or Josh Ball. Let me think of a few others that jump out to me. Chauncey Golston, Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert. Like these guys all have to have they all have to take significant steps if this team is going to be as good or better than last season's was. And when I say that to you, you're not expecting that to happen. There's no way, you know? And so that's where they have to lean because you're not going to be able to, like all the holes they have on this roster right now. For something I wrote for The Athletic about a week ago, I went throughout the entire roster and I was like, and I can still refer to that because there haven't been any additions since then. There's about 9 spots to me that still need to be filled out for a 53 going into the season. And out of those 9 spots, what can you realistically fill in the draft? I'm going to say 5 of them. You know, like I'll say I could see them getting like 4, maybe 6 if let's say they do a trade back and get an additional 3rd or 4th round, but maybe they can get 6 there. And when I say that, of course, I'm not expecting like starter type. I'm talking like one of them can be like a late round pick at linebacker that's going to have to help out on special teams because I think they still need 2 linebackers with the way that rule changes now in the kickoffs and things like that. Plus, they got to get bigger at linebacker than they had been. So I don't mean starters or stars or anything like that, but to fill 9 spots at this point right now, like I thought for sure that Jonathan Hankins would be back at defensive tackle, so that would knock one out. And it's just like, man, that defensive tackle spot, it was already a weakness. And now you're just looking at like, well, I don't know how you're filling this out. You're not doing it in the draft. I mean, defensive tackles in the draft are generally not performing their rookie years on that type of a level. So maybe they'll do a deal like they did with Hankins on a trade, you know, when they got him from the Raiders. But they need to do something in the middle of that defense. And so, I mean, if you're a Cowboys fan, you got to be really nervous about that because a lot of those players I just named, you've seen them for at least a season, if not more. Mm-hmm. And there probably isn't a lot there where you're super excited about it.
And the name that I didn't even mention because I wanted to keep him separate from this discussion because in a lot of ways, Tyron Smith represented an era for the Cowboys that, yes, was successful during the regular season, but ultimately did not get to where they wanted to go in terms of an NFC Championship game and beyond. And I look at that particular spot at left tackle, and I'm thinking about it in the context of Dak Prescott and a contract year. And I'm thinking, are the Cowboys really prepared to get a rookie left tackle to protect Dak Prescott's blind side after watching Tyron Smith? Well, yes, didn't play a full season since 2015. But as you know, they found a practice plan that allowed Tyron to be on the field. And my man was an all-pro this past season, and yet now he's going to be the personal protector for Aaron Rodgers and his potential vice presidential campaign in New York. So now what do they do with left tackle? Do they move Tyler Smith over there, or they keep him at guard where he was an all-pro this past season?
I mean, if the draft falls the right way, I'd be shocked if they didn't take an offensive tackle there at 24. I would be shocked. If the right one is there, it just makes too much sense in terms of, I understand that so many people are focused on this season, but you got to focus on, you can't be just drafting guys for this year. You got to be drafting guys for the long run. And with that will come growing pains. There's going to come times where, yeah, that left tackle is beaten and Dak's got to get the ball out of his hand, or he's got to, get out of the pocket, throw it away, throw it in the ground. But I'll be honest with you, a lot of quarterbacks deal with that. I mean, there's been many of those years where, whether it be Mahomes or Joe Burrow, where you're just like, man, I can't believe he even has a chance after the snap back there. So yeah, you're just not going to have a perfect situation. And let's be honest. I don't think I'm saying anything too crazy here when I say, with Tyron's age and his health and Aaron Rodgers' age and his health, like, what do you put the odds on that tandem is just rolling throughout the season, right into the playoffs, taking them right to the Super Bowl? Like, okay, it might. I might. There's a decent track record on the Tyron Smith thing that says that you might have needed to draft an offensive tackle at 24, even if you gave that 1-year deal to Tyron, because it's all about, well, what's the future at that position? And so I think the Tyler Smith thing is like Zach Martin. Like Zach Martin played tackle in college. Zach Martin could play tackle in the NFL, but he's a much better right guard, and they feel that same way about Tyler Smith. And so if they're forced, their hands forced, all those tackles are off the board, then yeah, I can see Tyler Smith being their left tackle next season. And let's say they draft a guard or a center somewhat early, and then maybe TJ Bass is the other starter there. But I think that if if they had it their way at 24, one of those offensive tackles that they really like will be there.
Yeah, and I just felt like with Smith's departure, he joins a long list of successful Cowboys, whether it be Jason Witten, Tony Romo, Travis Frederick, obviously now Tyron Smith, DeMarcus Ware, joins a long list of players that had terrific careers with this team, but ultimately couldn't find that success. What does his departure represent in terms of what this era of Cowboys was and what ultimately they weren't? Because he has been here, was here for 13 seasons for this football team, and now, of course, is gone with the Jets now.
Yeah, it's tough because like the players that you're going to name, the Jason Wittens, the Tyron Smiths. I mean, heck, people will throw Romo and Dez and these guys in those conversations.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Dez. Yeah.
DeMarcus Ware and all that. I would say it's more about just the league of parity. That why should anybody assume that just because you have good players, that they're going to win Super Bowls? So there's just so many good players that play for other organizations that never win Super Bowls. It's tough to do. I mean, heck, the Cowboys haven't been able to do it or come close since a salary cap was implemented. I mean, you look at all the Cowboys greats of the past, most of those names in the Ring of Honor were, I mean, let's be honest, like they could have some loaded teams that you really can't have that anymore, And so I think that that's part of it. But yeah, there's no question that, for me, it's that I would say 2007, 2016. I think those 2 years when, you get the 1 seed, in the NFC, you got to think out of one of those years, you're going to at least get the NFC Championship game and be able to make a run there. But I mean, I look at Tyron like I look at Zach. I mean, even if they don't have that deep playoff run on their resume, to me, they're still Hall of Famer, Ring of Honor guys that, it sucks that they weren't able to get a Super Bowl, but it just shows you that in today's NFL, like it's not guaranteed no matter who you are or what team you play for.
Tyron got so sick of Aaron Rodgers beating him. It was like, maybe I'll just go join him. Maybe even with him at this stage of his career, maybe I'll just go join because I have a better chance at least to try to maybe win with him right now than maybe him beating me once again.
What if that was all that was out there, though?
We
don't know. I mean, he said he was interviewed last week. He said it was Jets and Cowboys, and then Jerry says that they didn't have the money for, you have to if that deal because the way it sounds like that Jets made that offer and Tyron possibly went back to the Cowboys and was this is or his agent and this is what's on the table or whatever, and then the Jerry side of it is we couldn't afford it if he reaches all those incentives because like you've seen it goes up to 20 million. Mm-hmm. We know that he's not playing 17 games and he's probably not reaching that, but when you give out one of those deals like that, you have to set your books to the worst. Well, I guess that would be best possible scenario.
How about that? It'd be really good if he actually reached all those incentives actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you say that, but he's been on the team for how long and they haven't made a deep playoff run. I mean, that was the thing I used to say about the offensive line. I was like, I don't understand why you guys spend first-round picks on every single offensive lineman for it to have success, and they're not making any deep playoff runs there either. It's like that's the thing that's wild about the Cowboys during this entire run. It's like they had a Hall of Fame tight end. They've had really good quarterback play, had really good offensive line play. They've had some outstanding pass rushers. Had some great guys take the ball away on the back end. Really, the only thing that I can tell you that I feel like that's missing since I've covered the team is that they've really missed that that beast in the middle of the defensive line. I mean, it's really been since Jay Ratliff, and he wasn't a huge defensive tackle type, like, the 350 or whatever like that, but they've really missed just a game wrecker at defensive tackle. It's been a long time, since they've had something like that. That's the one spot that I will say that's kind of been missing from that entire run. You go back from basically when Romo took over through those years there. But other than that, I mean, they've had success getting players at every other position, it seems like.
Yeah, because you mentioned that position and the two names that immediately come to mind over the last now 10+ years. Obviously, Aaron Donald, who of course retired this past offseason, but Chris Jones with Kansas City has been an absolute monster for them and has wrecked games for years for Kansas City. And real quick aside, when we look back at the Chiefs having won the Super Bowl this past year, I think people need to take a deeper dive into how historically good that defense was. Because, yes, Mahomes will get all the, the accolades and the notoriety. That defense for Kansas City was spectacular. And what they did throughout the postseason and then what they did to San Francisco to ultimately win that championship, I think that goes a little bit more untalked about than what it should, given how great that defense was for Kansas City.
No, it was for sure. But I do believe I don't know, maybe I'm overrating him, but like I think of Patrick Mahomes like I think of Steph Curry in a sense that you just have such an advantage with them on your team that you can do things so differently than other teams can do because you can make up for it in ways that other teams just can't. He's just such a cheat code. Because I can see that Kansas City defense. You just pick that thing up, you put it right in Dallas, and you put Dallas's defense right in Kansas City, and I can see both seasons ending the exact same way that they did. I would. I
Yeah.
mean, don't get me wrong. Like, if my time covering the Cowboys, if you told me that they could have like one guy that wasn't on their team, yeah, it's Aaron Donald, no question. And I mean, hey, and Chris Jones these last few years is obviously in that category too. But I'm talking in this entire time, just because
Mm-hmm.
that has been such a missing piece for this defense, and they've tried with the Tristan Hills and the Mozzie Smiths, and aren't getting a good return on that. But I'd also say maybe you needed to take more swings, like instead of, just, those two guys, maybe every year they need to be second or third round trying to take a swing on another defensive tackle, hoping to get some type of a game record. Because it doesn't make sense that it's been this long where they've been just trying to piecing it together in the middle. I think of just when I started covering the team back with like the Monty Kiffin, Rod Marinelli days, it was like, it was never a big time, guy in that. It was a lot of moving pieces around and things like that. So, and hey, look, I mean, we're talking about two defensive tackles in Jones and Donald. They're
Sure.
obviously hard to come by, but yeah, that's certainly been missing somebody like that.
As we look and kind of open up John's crystal ball a little bit to the 2024 offseason and beyond, because we've talked about, Dak and obviously his situation and how that impacts the Cowboys. I'm looking at Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, both of them are going to be, CeeDee Lamb's already had his 5th-year exercise. Obviously, Micah Parsons going down the same road. Like, you're going to have two of the highest paid players at their positions, arguably in the history of the league. How do the Cowboys thread this needle with the salary cap issues that they have, but knowing that if you have your quarterback under contract and now these two coming, how are you going to continue to field the team? And I'm sure the Joneses have been asking and thinking about this question as well, especially with Micah and CeeDee. And we'll start with Micah because he becomes one of the more polarizing figures in this conversation, basically.
Oh, it's certainly doable. I mean, heck, let's just go back to what we were just talking about with Kansas City. I mean, you don't think they would like to have kept Snead or Tyreek Hill, but their money's tied up in Mahomes and Kelsey and Jones, and it's hard to argue with having your money tied up in those guys at all. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, like going off what I just said, you could give, okay, let's say Dak got 55 million, Micah got 35. So that's $90 million. I can make the argument, if you're asking me, I would be like, I'll give 75 million a year to Patrick Mahomes. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
he's worth it. He's worth 80.
Yeah.
He might be worth 90. He might be worth 100. I mean, seriously, because I do think that he is that much of a game changer. But they're finding ways to do it, which with tough decisions, and the Cowboys will have to do the same thing. Like if they get Dak, CeeDee, and Micah done, which I believe that they can, and that's why they're not doing anything right now. The problem is that when you go forward, it's going to be harder to re-sign a lot of other guys, and you're going to have to hit in the draft because you're not going to be doing anything notable in free agency. So you can't have a draft class like last year's where, because here's my thing, like I just don't have high hopes for last year's draft class 2 years from now, 3 years from now. It's not even about just, well, hey, it just wasn't a good rookie year. Like I don't see that class being anything like real special, And
Yeah.
so when you do tie up all that money into three big dollar guys like that, you have to hit on the draft. And let's be honest, I mean, yeah, last year's draft wasn't great. Every team is going to have a draft like that. I have a lot of confidence that if you tell me that you got to keep drafting going forward with Will McClay calling the shots, he's not going to have many draft classes like that last one. He's going to have a lot more like the one that got them Zach Martin and DeMarcus Lawrence or Dak Prescott in the 4th round, finding guys like, yeah, you might miss on Calvin Joseph in the 2nd, but you find a Deron Bland in the 5th, Trayvon Diggs in the 2nd, stuff like that. Like, I like the idea. That's why I'm also, not to get too far off the subject, I'm all about them trading back in the 1st round. Like, I still needs to be a 1st round pick, but I'm trying to give Will as many opportunities as possible to get as many, I guess you'd call it as many, plate attempts.
Yeah.
Because, and again, when I say that, like, I don't mean like trading back from 24 to like into the 2nd round or whatever. I mean like trading back like 5 or 6 spots, maybe getting a 3rd or 4th round pick out of it. if the player they don't absolutely love isn't there at 24. But I have a ton of faith in Will McClay in the draft process. I do think that is one of the strengths of this organization. You wouldn't be in this situation without it. I mean, thinking about the guys they're paying, they aren't guys they went out and got. I mean, they're guys that, and it's not just the three that we talked about. It's, they just paid Trayvon Diggs, and before that they paid Zach Martin, and before that, there's Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins and Ezekiel Elliott and Jalen Smith, and I'm just trying to think of all the guys that they've given notable contracts to. Those are, none of them are outside the building guys. Not since Brandon Carr have they given a notable contract like that to somebody outside the building. So I have faith in that, but I know that that's not what fans want to hear, especially this time of year when it seems like everybody else is making moves.
You brought up a name, but I want to touch on real quick because I'm just waiting on the reaction. Let's say it does happen. If the Cowboys brought back Ezekiel Elliott for the 2024 NFL season, I'm just trying to imagine how Cowboys fans would react to that, even though based on what he is now at this point in his career, I mean, he can help some, but it just feels like it would be a backwards move to bring back Ezekiel Elliott, given what they didn't think he was and letting him walk to New England last year.
I agree. And that's why it's hard for me to believe that would happen between now and the draft. I think running back is very high on their list of positions they're interested in. And I envision them taking a running back in the second or third round. And if they don't, because I mean, let's be honest, they were lined up to do that last year, and the right back didn't follow them. And then all of a sudden now it's like, well, sixth round will take Deuce Vaughn. But they didn't really address the loss of Zeke. They gave more to Tony Pollard, but they really, and Rico Dowdle, but that was really not enough there. And I think they know now more than ever that they have to draft it back. But let's say, hey, just the way things unfold, just that great back that they really like a lot isn't there. You get through this draft and you didn't take a running back in the first 4 or 5 rounds. I understand fans being like, well, I don't need to see more from Zeke or Dalvin Cook or something like that, but you got to do something. I mean, the running back still has to be addressed. They're not going into the 2024 season with Deuce, Rico, Lipke as the three. They're adding somebody somewhere. And so as you sit here today, for sure, I can see you being like, yeah, I don't want to really do that again. That's not really going to do much. But if you get outside of the draft is over and you're just like, man, what are they really doing at running back? I mean, that's where I see them potentially bringing in one of those guys like that. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Mike McCarthy said it at that luncheon the other day that the breakfast that running back is still something that they need to address. So when I hear that, I think of those two, Cook, Zeke. I think of J.K. Dobbins. I'll give how we were just talking about Kansas City. I'll give another guy. You said about Zeke, does Clyde Edwards-Helaire really get you excited?
No.
I mean, he's a former first-round pick that by this organization that somehow can find Pacheco to work out, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't. I mean, that's kind of what's out there right now.
Yeah. It's kind of slim pickings at the running back position, but the name that as you were rattling out some of those as we get toward the NFL draft is, I mean, Jonathan Brooks is out there from Texas, and the Cowboys have close ties with him, seeing as their guy did the surgery on Jonathan Brooks's ACL. So
the only reason I'm laughing is because it lines up perfectly for what the Cowboys usually do in the second round, where they take a guy that's got a little bit of injury, whatever like that, like they think they're getting a bargain, whatever like that. So no, the Brooks thing totally makes sense for sure.
Yeah, you had mentioned guys like, Damarian Overshown and Mozzie Smith and Schoonmaker, and having to depend on some of these guys. A lot of these guys are coming off injury. We just learned that Mozzie Smith, Schoonmaker, having surgeries. Obviously, Damarian Overshown coming off a torn ACL, coming back this upcoming season. They've got a lot of guys that they're trying to depend on to fill in holes that may or may not. Even Trayvon Diggs in this case falls into the category because he's coming off a torn ACL. There's a lot of moving parts here that have a lot of dudes with broken parts trying to get fixed to help this team this upcoming season. I'm trying to figure out how all that works for a team that's, they need a lot of help here.
It doesn't look good. I mean, if you're looking at it on paper, again, last year on paper, I thought that was the best team that they've had in over a decade. And you look at this team and you're just like, and where it's headed, and because let's be honest, they haven't done anything in the first 3 weeks of agency. You really think they're going to make some real bold trade, for somebody, whether it be in the next few weeks or during the season? I mean, why would you expect that? So because of that, it's almost like you feel like, yeah, they're going to add pieces of the draft class, and then they're going to go into rookie minicamp and OTAs, and kind of like training camp. This is what they got, and this is what they're going to work with, and it's not going to look better on paper than it did last year. So, if you want me to try and be positive, I'll tell you this. I would say that nobody thought that 2014 would go the way that it did, coming off of like what they were in 13. Nobody was expecting them to win 12 games, have the year that they did, and then the following year to drop down like they did, and then to have Tony go down and then Dak step in and have the year in 2016. So 14 and 16 would be the two things. If I was trying to be positive to Cowboys fans, I would tell you, look at 14 and 16. Going into those years, those are very low expectations. I remember before one of them, even at the opening press conference in training camp, Jerry talked about it being like an uphill battle, and you're just like, man, this is the press conference to kick off training camp. Who's this Jerry Jones, and what has he done with the actual Jerry Jones? Because I couldn't believe he was even admitting that, and those ended up being seasons that they overachieved, and so it's kind of funny because I saw that there's an early Vegas line out on like the over under on win total, and it's at 10. And I was like, man, when I got that email, I was like, I can't tweet this out fast enough because I know people are just gonna be like, oh, bang the under, bang the under. And I'm like, no, I think 10 is legit. Like, you can
even against 8 playoff teams, they got 8 playoff teams on their schedule this upcoming
I'm telling you,
season.
because the NFL is just, it's such a league of parity that it's like, when you see that, you're thinking, okay, all those teams are going to be all hitting on top cylinder, healthy and stuff like that. But you know that everybody's not going to be on that level. And to be honest with you, you can knock Mike McCarthy all you want. In Green Bay, it was just like what we've seen here in Dallas. Like, obviously they had more playoff success, but the guy knows how to get consistency out of teams during the regular season. So it does not surprise me. I probably would bet the over, but I did not think that 10 was that crazy of a number. I really didn't. 10 and 7? Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, and that does speak to the parity of the league. And obviously the NFC East is going through a little bit of fluctuation in and of itself with Washington, and who knows what the Giants are going to do at quarterback. Philadelphia, they've brought in some guys, but Jalen Hurts, can he kind of bounce back after the way he struggled a little bit as the season went on? And that gets us to our last portion of today's conversation, because we've talked about a lot with the terms of the personnel and what they got to do to replace certain guys and how that's all going to look as we get toward the NFL draft, and maybe they can, get some reinforcements there. But one thing that's not changing is Jerry and Stephen Jones at the top of the organization. And the approval rating is, for the both of them right now, is probably as low as it's ever been for the two of them combined, given what they haven't done to be able to try to fortify this team this offseason, but really just the amount of years that they have not been able to ultimately be successful. How do these two try in some way to rally a fan base that really is kind of on the outs on both of them based off of what their team hasn't been able to achieve?
I mean, Stephen Jones is fine with Jerry being out front and him being, him saying what he wants to say and him stirring it up. And Stephen is kind of like, he sits back a little bit more when it comes to that public side of it. He does obviously weekly radio interviews. We talk to him after games sometimes. Very, very accessible to the media and that. But I don't get the sense that I don't get the sense that he's beaten down by stuff that people are tweeting, like, let's say you and I would, if it was, something that we were doing. Let's say we were in charge of the Cowboys. And I think that part of that is probably because just he's not from this social media era. And so how much of that is he really, I'm sure his kids tell him and things like that, like, I do think it's funny. Me and Helmut will joke around about this. Like, do you think that they've told him, like, Dad, on Twitter, they keep calling you Cat Boy. Are you familiar with this? Like something like that. But I think that he knows that, or he feels that most of the hate and criticism is directed towards Jerry. And I think it's easier for him to take that because of, so I know like you're into like the WWE, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I always thought, I haven't really followed it over the last like 10 or 15 years, but when I was a kid, I always would be like, I never could understand why anybody would want to be like the bad guy. Like, why wouldn't you want the matches, set up so that you can be, Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior or whatever like that.
Uh-huh.
But you can make such a successful career out of being the heel. And I think that you have to be kind of wired a certain way to do that, to be willing to be like, yeah, you're going to get a lot of publicity and you're going to make a lot of money and a lot of fame, but you're going to be the guy that people, like, there's going to be a lot of hate towards you. And I think Jerry's got that in him where he's fine with that. Now, when I say that, I don't think for a second that he's like trying to sabotage the team to be the bad guy. I
Sure.
do truly believe that what they are doing, he believes is the best way to get them to a Super Bowl. Now, everybody or a lot of people can disagree with that and say that you got to do this or you got to do that, but I do believe that he really thinks that what they're doing is that best opportunity. But in that, he does not care about people ripping him because he kind of likes the fact, or not kind of, he does. He likes the fact that people keep talking about them. That, it's like you see these teams that they are. I mean, look at the Ravens and the Chiefs. And I mean, these teams are knocking on the door, the Niners and that. And the Cowboys aren't even getting to an NFC championship game. And they're talked about more than all of those teams. And so there's a part of that where because of that, Jerry can be the heel and just keep on moving. But actually, that even might be a bad comparison because when I use the WWE thing, because one difference here is I feel like with a WWE heel, I feel like when you walk out, like you're going to see the hate from the fans.
That's true.
I very rarely see any hate from fans towards Jerry. When you're out in Oxnard, you can't get a sign and autographs chanting Jerry, Jerry. Like, and being a guy from Detroit where like, I mean, Fire Millen chants and the way they've acted about Tom Gore's, the Pistons owner and stuff like that, like how fed up they are with ownership there. Like they make it vocal. They're at the games with signs, things like that, protesting and stuff like that. Like Jerry doesn't really get that. And that includes not just Cowboys fans, but like in Philadelphia, like I've seen him out there signing autographs and Eagles fans joking with him and stuff like that. I'm telling you, you can talk all the negativity you want about Jerry Jones, but when you get around him, good luck. I bet you can't keep it going for very long because there's just something about him that gets you kind of like, yeah, it's just Jerry. He's just one of the guys, stuff like that. So I guess he's not a complete embracing the heel because I do think that he genuinely he wants to be liked in that. But I think that he is fine with the hate because he knows and you're talking about the Cowboys and he loves that.
Yeah, he has a certain disarming type of charm that, you may have some ire toward him, but when you start talking to him, he's just like, all right, Jerry, we get it. All right, we'll let it go. But it's just that's what he has been and how he's been able to have such a successful career in a lot of ways. But I could tell you right now, the way that my Twitter feed be jumping off, folks are sick of it. They are over the entire Jones experience at this point, especially knowing that Jerry's going to talk, but not necessarily say much. He's going to say a lot, but the actions, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, may tell us.
I'm being serious here. Can you imagine AT&T Stadium? Can you imagine being there during a game, things are going poorly, and it's so clear you can hear it on TV of fans chanting, sell the team? You want to talk about a huge story? That would be. Never heard anything close to that. Never seen a sign, never anything like that. But that would be huge. If it was one of those things where things got so ugly that people were doing stuff like that, it would be interesting to see the way that would be received nationally because we don't know that world because we've never seen it. And it's kind of surprising when you go 28 years without going to an NFC Championship game.
ESPN, Fox, and every other network would eat it up like crazy. It would be the best day of their lives because they would have content for days and weeks and months on end based off of that. I mean, look, Cowboys already feed the network as much as they do already when just basic stuff is happening. I can only imagine how tenfold that would increase if something like that went down in these networks, eating it up the way that they do. But hey, I guess that's the Cowboys way, I guess. As long as they're being talked about, that's all that matters, I guess.
Yeah, and Jerry's not selling the team, so what does it matter? You can go there all you want and chant as much as you want. He won't care. He might laugh and start chanting with you. He doesn't. Right. That team's never going anywhere. That's his baby. There's not a dollar amount out there he could be offered for that team. So,
John, tell the folks where they can find you. What you got going on, man?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely on The Athletic. If you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. And then on Twitter at Jon Machota. Even though it's the off season, I'm always trying to fire some stuff off on Twitter, but also or X. And but even though it's the off season, like we're still writing all the time. I always think it's funny when people be like, "Oh man, you must not have anything going on because the Cowboys aren't doing anything in free agency." I'm just like, do you think that we just don't write when there's not anything going on? You write about nothing that's going on and what needs to happen and why isn't anything happening? So yeah, it never stops. But that's also kind of the greatness of the NFL that it is turned into this year-round news cycle. There's always something going on in the league, and that it makes it interesting for sure.
I will say the NFL doing a little too much now, because now you're taking up my Christmas. Okay, now we got Christmas Day games on a Wednesday. Not only did we have Christmas, we got two of them. Like, come on, Roger, you're going to have to relax now. I need a day to be able to relax off the league. But he's like, actually, no, you guys are going to watch this football, and guess what? We're going to be right there watching the football.
It is interesting because I always go back to the when it was around the first time, right when I got down here. I want to say maybe I got down here at the end of 2010, and so maybe he said it in 2011, 2012. I'll have to go back and check, but there was a pretty good interview with Mark Cuban, and he talked about the growth of the NFL and talking about pigs getting fat and hogs getting slaughtered, and it's kind of one of those things where I've always looked back at, because I'm always just like, when? Because it's so many years. I mean, we're almost on a decade of him saying that, and I'm just kind of like, is that kind of like me saying, well, you know what? Well, Jon Machota's going to die. Yeah, one day. But when? Is that going to be next week? Is that in a month? Is that 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30? Like, when are the hogs getting slaughtered? And his point was that if you get too out of control and too greedy and start putting games on every. So I'm interested to see, the more they do this, obviously they have the TV numbers at their hands, and the reason they're doing this is because they have had good return on investment. I wonder if it gets to a point where they're like, no, let's back this off a little bit. We don't need 2 Thursday night games, or we don't need to have this on Monday or Wednesday or something like that. I wonder if that happens, because the other side of it that obviously comes from when you say the Christmas is it's a Wednesday. They talk about player safety. How much player safety is there when you're playing whatever 3-4 days later? There's not a lot of safety involved with that. And you tie that in with like the hip drop tackle being outlawed, and there's just a lot of things that obviously are placating towards the offense. So you're just like, well, are they going to get to a level where this is like, there's not really that physical, and then they're feeling like the guys can play every other day and stuff like that? Like, is that how crazy? Again, I don't see that happening anytime soon, but I'm just like, when would this get dialed back? Because where I look at it right now, like I said, I'm looking around and I'm just kind of like, I don't know. When are these hogs getting slaughtered, Mark? Because it seems like business is booming around here.
Booming. I knew the NFL was on some sicko behavior when they decided to put out their Black Friday football games. Like, all right, that's enough. That is enough. But it's like, no, actually, I want more. So here comes more football. So shout out to the NFL for printing money, because that's what they do.
All right, I had to look it up. It was March of 2014. He said just watch. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. When you try to take it too far, people turn the other way. I'm just telling you, when you've got a good thing and you get greedy, it always, 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 always turns on you. So that, and I mean, he is such a successful businessman that I totally believe what he's saying. So I guess where I'm going is, I wonder what will be too far, because obviously get there, because like you're saying a Wednesday Christmas game, like, I mean, what if they try and get it to where it is like, that's just a normal thing where they're like, no, we're going to do Sunday. We're going to have some games on Wednesday, Thursday. And I think they'll stay away from Fridays and Saturdays because of high school and college football. But like, what if they did get to a point where it's like 3-4 days a week? The part, I know I'm rambling here, but I just want to add in one more thing on this. The part, though, that makes me think that even then they wouldn't get slaughtered is because of the gambling side of it. Like, people are going to, like, if you put it on people are going to love that. Oh, hey, this is something for me to bet on, So
yes,
it's tough, man. It's tough to see where this thing's going. But I mean, as of right now, the salary cap keeps going up. The TV revenue keeps going up. The TV broadcasters' salaries keep going up. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy out here. That is it for this episode of the Gray Area Podcast. Again, thanks to Jon Machota of The Athletic for joining me here on the podcast today. Make sure you check out all of his work at The Athletic covering the Dallas Cowboys. I'll be back on Friday with my man Reginald Atatula for Reds Fridays as we talk a little NCAA tournaments, the NFL, and a little bit more as Major League Baseball is underway and the Texas Rangers are getting ready to do their thing to defend their world championship. I'll be back with Reg on Friday. But appreciate you joining me here on the Gray Area Podcast. Like and comment on the video and subscribe to the Gray Area wherever you get your podcast for free. Until Friday, I'll talk to you later. Peace.